Hello colleagues, and welcome to the introduction to Supervisely video. In this specific video, we will focus on two things. We will focus on the tasks that Supervisely addresses, the scope of these tasks, and we will speak about the solution, the approach that we take to solve this quite ambitious scope of tasks that you will see in a second. So let's focus on the tasks first. And from very high level perspective, when we do computer vision projects, what we do, we go from raw data to production model or production models. But there are quite a number of intermediate steps or processes here, like labeling, model training, maybe quality assurance. And those processes are interconnected somehow. And it's extremely rarely when we see this straight path from raw data to production model. Usually we travel through this graph quite a lot, and sometimes even multiple times back and forth before we actually went all the way from raw data to production model. And on top of that, we might want to automate the process. So looking at this diagram, we can formulate our ambitious goal, which is Supervisely should allow to go from raw data from here to production models to here from a web browser for all tasks in computer vision in an efficient, user-friendly way. And maybe you do not just want go here with Supervisely. Maybe you just want to label your data efficiently. But in this case, to have the ability to train and apply deep learning models to speed up labeling might be also important. Okay, so let's move further here. Let me try to decompose this task, this goal even further. So I will outline this process and automation and put those into the header of the table like this. On the rows of the table, there will be different modalities and associated tasks. And we can construct the matrix like this. So essentially, the goal is to have a software that cover every cell here. And the problem here is that, say, the software to solve classification labeling task on images is very different from the labeling interfaces, say, for detection for LiDAR data. So that's quite a challenging task, quite an ambitious goal, I would say. So let's see how we approach to the solution, how we address this goal. And the main insight here is to look at the analogies with operating systems. So if we take Windows and all the applications on top of Windows, like say Microsoft Office, games and so on, we will see that the particular operating system and all the apps on top is very powerful thing. So the entire ecosystem addresses a much wider range of tasks, and our matrix here is just tiny compared to what operating systems do. So if we want to be successful in addressing our scope of tasks, we also should follow architectural patterns of operating systems. So for example, in Supervisely there are core components and apps on top. And the most value for the end users are actually here on the app level. If we go back to the table, we can outline that core components do ensure some light coverage of certain columns here, but it's the combination of core components and apps that ensures the full coverage. Okay, let's speak about the main components of Supervisely. And those are Supervisely core components, agent, and apps. So core components includes labeling interfaces, collaboration, quality assurance, data management, and probably most importantly API and SDK. Agent or App Engine, when sometimes we call it this way, is actually open source software that makes it possible to run apps on top of Supervisely. And here is a very interesting question: what is Supervisely app? And the answer is that Supervisely app is just a GitHub repository. And that might be, in some cases, GitHub repository without any modifications, though more often you can think of that as some popular GitHub repository safe to train modern deep learning models. And we take this repository, add graphic user interface to that and integration code, and transform this black dot to this green dot, so that those are one kind of the apps that are built on top of popular GitHub repositories. Another kind of the apps are just GitHub repositories that were specifically developed for Supervisely ecosystem. So those are Supervisely apps. Okay, let's move on and speak about conceptual model of Supervisely. And you can think of the following diagrams that will follow as a kind of dashboard available from the web browser. So here is enterprise core components, and if it's a dashboard, we can actually click and open labeling interfaces, and sometimes even more than one for a single modality, and get the data labeled. And the same for videos, the same for LiDAR data, the same for DICOM data. There are also collaboration tools and data management tools. So though this core component, this software is very, very powerful, it's still just a tiny bit of the entire story. So there is app engine or agent on top as a bridge that acts like a bridge, and there are apps. And as a reminder, apps are just certain kinds of GitHub repositories. And let's do the following. Let's put here this blue dot that represents the apps or repositories specifically developed for Supervisely ecosystem, and these green dots that usually represent some state-of-the-art deep learning models that we can train and apply. And then we can start clustering these apps. For example, some apps might represent specialized labeling interfaces. Some apps might represent popular GitHub repositories, popular models, standard models, or say interactive models. Performance analysis is another cluster here, and we can keep doing this clustering. So here is the main idea that probably I would like to emphasize the most. So what Supervisely allows to do, it allows us to make state-of-the-art computer vision tools few clicks away from the end user. So what it essentially means is that when user needs to label images, he just clicks and gets the images labeled. If there is a need for special kind of visualization, again, he clicks, run a specific app and gets the visualization, in this case, instance-based visualization of objects. Maybe a user wants to train some state-of-the-art model, so he just run an app, click, and say, pick the data which he would like to use for the training purposes, pick the model, the backbone, and get the model trained. And then maybe he wants to visualize the performance of the model, and there are certain apps for that, for example, that build these sorts of confusion matrices. So the important part is that you can think again of that as a kind of dashboard, and just by clicking here on and running certain apps, the access to the large scope of computer vision tools become instantly available. So Supervisely core is software, App Engine is software, apps is software. On top of that, there is a process which we call App Production Factory, which consists in taking popular GitHub repositories and converting them into Supervisely apps, or developing apps specifically for Supervisely ecosystem. And this process, this App Production Factory, this process of these transformations is performed by us, community and partners, which actually ensures quite large stream of new apps, so that apps might grow quite quickly. And we put a lot of efforts to make it easier to create apps in Supervisely. So let's summarize everything briefly. Supervisely goal is to address all tasks in computer vision. And to achieve the goal, Supervisely follows architectural pattern of operating systems. There are core components and apps. And apps is very important for us in a way that the most value for the end user will be and is here. And we also talk about a production factory, which is a process that ensures exponential growth of apps in Supervisely ecosystem. And we will talk a bit later about the nature of this exponential growth of apps. And finally, and I think that is the most important part here, is user experience. It takes just a few clicks to access state-of-the-art computer vision tools for the user, represented as graphic user-based, user-friendly apps via web browser. So I think it's all about user experience. See you in the next section.